Welcome to Wizardry. I'm glad to have you along on this second video in my Idols of Torment build. In my first video, I explained the inspiration of this build based on the creation of Jeremy at Black Magic Craft. His new Dark Skirmish game has a delightfully ominous feel and hauntingly bizarre miniatures. In this video, I'll be painting more components to the build, a demon head and a couple of crosses. I'd like to thank Nightmare Landscapes for providing the 3D prints in this video, as well as again providing the paints and the washes. I hope you are enjoying my videos and are as anxious as I am to see the end results of this project. Thank you. These prints from Thingiverse are beautiful, but in my mind the crosses and pedestal have been part of this landscape for a long time, and that time has been less than hospitable. After removing the cross from the base, I began the task of aging and weathering the models. Starting with the pedestal, I sanded the top to remove most traces of where the cross had been attached, but left some scarring. Then I worked on creating the effects of what time and the elements would have caused these structures. After I had completed the modifications to the pedestal, I started aging and weathering the cross. This is such a cool model, I felt more than a little guilty destroying it. Using files, pliers, and knives, I modified it to match how I envisioned it would look in the setting that I'm creating. After a quick wash to clarify the details, I finish off the process of modification. Before I started the paint job on the demon head, I gave it a good dry brushing to bring out the details and have a good roadmap to follow. I was pleasantly surprised at the additional detail that was visible after the dry brushing. I would enjoy a few more prints of this model to try other paint jobs on someday. With the dry brushing done, I started the paint job. I sketched in the basic colors at first on the raised areas, the muscle and sinew, or in this case the vines and bark that make up the musculature. I mixed and blended the colors on my palette to create the shades and tones I was looking for as the scheme progressed. Overall, I see the tree, I'll call it the Tree of Lost Souls, as being long dead in appearance. But at least this demon who dwells within the tree is very much alive. Even so, I want to paint a scheme that is overall dark, not unlike the shadows deep in the forest under a heavy canopy, or the diffused light on a cold winter day. I wet blended red, blues, and purples into the shadows and in the eye sockets, and used glazes of those colors to bring out a uniformity in the paint job. I often used my Nightmare Landscapes washes as a glaze, or thinned my paint with the wash to make a glaze. I feel it's worth mentioning again the amount of detail on this model. I couldn't help but think of other paint schemes that would look amazing on it. I feel like it's such a beautifully haunting creation. I dry brushed the crest and some of the facial features of the demon green to represent the life within it as it emerges from the seemingly dead Tree of Lost Souls. Following the dry brush, I gave the model a wash of a mixture of Nightmare Black, Dried Blood Red, and Haunted Tree Brown to tie all the colors together. Starting with the spinal column, I worked on bringing back the colors that had been muted by the wash. I varied the mix of the browns that I was putting on, blending in the different tints of red, blue, and green, and pushing more purple into the shadows. It was my hope that the purples and reds would indicate blood flowing through this living being. With the demon head complete, it was time for the crosses and pedestal. I edited this in the way that I had painted it, jumping from one model to the next as I went through the steps to make them look weathered and worn. The method I used was pretty straightforward. A dark gray dry brush, just a touch of brown in it, covering most of the black primer. I started out the pedestal in the same way, with a slightly darker gray than I had done with the cross. The next step was a lighter dry brush with a lighter gray with some brown added to it. As the stone cross and pedestal dried, I started the base coat on the iron cross. I started with Nightmare Brown, adding a small amount of Nightmare Red. During this process, I used thicker paint at times and stippled to make texture on the model. I then grabbed Nightmare Black and mixed Haunted Tree Brown and Dried Blood Red washes. Using a small piece of sponge, I dabbed the hard-to-reach recesses and stippled the raised areas. I often dipped the sponge into the Nightmare Black to get darker reds. Then, with a black-red mix, I made sure the recessed areas got a good working, where water would have collected over the years. With the iron cross drying, it was time to use the same stippling method with the sponge on the pedestal and stone cross. Using white, black, and various grays I'd mixed. I often have two colors on the sponge and rotate it as I stipple to get varying layers of color. I think it helps add to the depth of the pitted stone. As I put the finishing touches on the stone cross and the pedestal, I felt less guilty than I did in the beginning about tearing this model apart. As I dabbled on the highlights, I was pleased with the results. They did indeed look ancient and worn, and would fit well within the landscape that I'm building. And as for the iron cross, I feel it too looks good. It looks ancient and worn, and I'm happy with the rust effect I ended up with. All in all, I'm very happy with the way this project is shaping up. I have a long way to go on this Idols of Torment build, but completing these models puts me that much closer to the finish line, and I can start putting some of this stuff onto the landscape. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, please. It means a lot. And for now, I'm Wes, and this is Wizardry.